I call this remote meeting of the House Higher Education Committee to order. The CLA will take the roll.
Chair Bernardi.
Present.
Chair Bernardi, present. Vice Chair Christensen.
Present.
Vice Chair Christensen, present. Representative O'Neill.
O'Neill, present.
Representative O'Neill, present. Representative Albright.
Present.
Representative Albright, present. Representative Daniels is excused. Representative Erickson.
Erickson, present.
Representative Erickson, present. Representative Hansen.
Hansen, present.
Representative Hansen, present. Representative Heinzman.
Present.
Heinzman, present. Representative Howard.
Howard, present.
Representative Howard, present. Representative Keeler.
Keeler, present.
Representative Keeler, present. Representative Cleburne. Representative Cleburne. Representative Kosnick.
Kosnick, present.
Representative Kosnick, present. Representative Creshaw.
Creshaw, present.
Representative Creshaw, present. Representative Mason.
Mason, present.
Representative Mason, present. Representative Meckland. Representative Meckland. Representative Noor.
Noor, present.
Representative Noor, present. Representative Sandell.
Present.
Representative Sandell, present. Representative Sandsted.
Present.
Representative Sandsted, present. Representative Thompson.
Representative Thompson, present.
Representative Thompson, present. Representative Cleburne. Representative Meckland.
Meckland, present.
Representative Meckland, present. Madam Chair, a quorum is present.
Thank you. Next, may I have a motion to approve the minutes for February 16th, 2022?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Sandsted moves approval of the minutes for February 16th, 2022. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion prevails and the minutes for February 16th, 2022 are approved. Today, we have a presentation from the Office of Higher Education, who will give us an overview of the governor's budget recommendations. We will pause to take questions from members at the end of each section of the presentation. With us today, we have Commissioner Dennis Olson. Commissioner Olson, welcome back to our committee. Please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Bernardi and members. For the record, my name is Dennis Olson, and I serve as the Commissioner of the Minnesota Office of Higher Education. And I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to join the committee today to share the Governor's supplemental budget recommendations. And I have with me Nikki Oliver, who's going to help me drive the slides that you see in front of you. And the budget recommendations I'm going to share today are really split into two main categories. The first category includes a handful of budget proposals that aim to further center support for children and families. You can go to the next slide, Nikki. And the next, please. So I want to start out by discussing the governor's recommendation to support the underrepresented student teacher grant. The governor recommends increased funding in the amount of $800,000 to expand and administer the underrepresented student teacher grant program. This program seeks to reduce financial barriers eligible students from underrepresented communities face when completing a required 12-week student teaching experience by providing a grant up to $7,500. These experiences often require students to leave their current employment or reduce their hours in order to complete their student teaching requirement. And this student teaching requirement is usually unpaid. As a result, individuals may not complete a teacher preparation program because they're not financially able to provide for themselves or their families during this 12-week period without any income. So the current appropriation is insufficient to award all eligible students at the maximum award amount. Next slide, please. The governor is also recommending increased funding in the amount of $3 million to expand and administer the Student Teachers in Shortage Areas Grant Program. And the program provides post-secondary financial assistance to eligible students enrolled in Minnesota teacher preparation programs who are working in teaching shortage areas, primarily serving greater Minnesota. Awarded students receive grants of up to $7,500 during the term in which they are completing the required student teaching experience. And these grants reduce financial impact to students who must leave or reduce employment to complete student teaching. The current appropriation for this program is also not sufficient to award all eligible students at that maximum grant award of $7,500. Next slide, please. And rounding out the recommendations around the teacher support programs, the governor is also recommending increased funding in the amount of $700,000 to expand and administer the Teacher Shortage Loan Repayment Program. The Teacher Shortage Loan Repayment Program provides student loan debt relief in the form of annual repayment awards of up to 5 years to eligible teachers working in designated teacher shortage areas. There's currently a greater demand than existing appropriations can support. For the fiscal year 2022, the Office of Higher Education received 440 applications from eligible teachers. However, the office anticipates only being able to award 194 with support of the existing appropriation. Next slide. The governor is also recommending an increased investment of $14.8 million in the Minnesota State Grant Program in order to modify existing eligibility requirements. This recommendation promotes continued affordability of Minnesota's post-secondary education system for low-wage working adults and middle-income families. And as a reminder, more than 40% of state grant recipients are students of color and Indigenous students in Minnesota. Specifically, this proposal modifies the program eligibility requirements of the Minnesota State Grant in 2 ways. The first is that credits in which a student has received a $1 or more in state grant aid by term will count towards their lifetime eligibility of Minnesota State Grant awards. And the second eligibility requirement change allows students to qualify for a state grant for up to 10 semesters or equivalent of grant receipt. And the current eligibility is 8 semesters. Next slide. The governor's recommending an increased funding amount of $1.7 million to expand and administer the Tribal College Supplemental Grant Assistance Program. And the goal here is to support Minnesota tribal colleges by defraying the costs associated with all Minnesota resident students, regardless of their status as enrolled members of federally recognized Indian tribes. Minnesota's tribal colleges are a valuable asset to their tribes, to local communities, and the state, as you heard testimony from the tribal college presidents last week. This particular proposal seeks to align the funding for Minnesota tribal colleges with the per FTE state support of Minnesota public institutions. Next slide, please. The governor is also recommending funding in the amount of $6.9 million to establish and administer the Student Parent Center Grant Program. This program aims to provide campus support and resources to address the unique needs of expectant and parenting college students. Specifically, the funds will provide competitive grants to create new grant programs and build capacity of existing student parent programs on campuses. Student parents face multiple barriers to college enrollment, persistence, and completion. And research shows us that they benefit from holistic supports, including specialized advising, intentional creation of cohorts and support groups, access to assistance with navigating applications for public benefits programs, and campus-based programs like career and personal counseling. The challenges facing expectant and parenting students were further magnified by the COVID-19 pandemic, and the re-enrollment and new enrollment rates for this population in particular have declined significantly since March of 2020. Next slide, please. The governor is also recommending increased funding in the amount of $731,000 to expand and administer the Emergency Assistance for Post-Secondary Students Grant Program. The program provides financial resources to students experiencing unexpected immediate financial hardships that may prevent them from continuing their post-secondary education. In fiscal year 2022, the Office of Higher Education received significantly more applications than the current appropriation could support. The increased appropriation will meet existing demand as well as expand the number of institutions that have the opportunity to participate in the Emergency Assistance Grant Program. Next slide, please. The governor is also recommending an appropriation of $10 million for a new program that proposes to waive college application fees. And with application fees ranging from anywhere from $20 to upwards of $55, and coupled with the fact that prospective students will often apply to multiple colleges, the cost of applying can add up quickly and may discourage students from completing the college application process. So the governor is recommending funding a pilot program to eliminate college application fees for undergraduate post-secondary applications through this particular program. And funds will be used to coordinate and administer the program to waive application fees for Minnesota's public, private nonprofit, and tribal colleges. Next slide, please. And Chair Bernardi, I know you wanted to stop for questions after each section, but I do just have a couple more slides here, and that'll conclude the presentation. And then, if it's okay with you, we can open it up for questions.
Okay, Chris, why don't you proceed and we will take questions. I don't see anyone's hands up yet anyway. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the next two budget proposals recommended by the governor are aimed at expanding economic opportunity and really serve to continue to support the economic vitality of the state. Next slide, please. For this particular focus area, the governor is recommending additional funding in the amount of $2 million to expand and administer the dual training competency grants program at the Department of Labor and the Department of Labor and Industry pipeline program. The additional funding will allow the programs to meet existing demand as well as expand eligibility to two critical high-need industries, those being childcare and early childhood education, as well as transportation. The DLI pipeline program, as you well know, works with industry councils to identify competency standards that are necessary for employment in specific occupations. The dual training grant program helps employers fill critical vacancies, provide training for their workforce, and support trainees in earning industry recognized degrees, certificates, or credentials. Specifically, the program reimburses grantees for the cost of tuition, fees, any required books, and required or related materials of their Earn While You Learn trainees. The dual training grant appropriations, unfortunately, have not been sufficient to meet the current application requests from our industry partners. For example, application requests for the previous grant round were around $3.7 million, but only $2.7 million was available in the appropriation. And unfortunately, 15 of 64 applications were not funded, and an additional 13 were only partially funded. Next slide, please. And finally, the governor is recommending increased investments with a total amount of $82 million for both public higher education systems. Specifically for the University of Minnesota, the governor is recommending funding for two key components of the total budget request from the University of Minnesota. First, item related to the increasing access to the university by reducing the cost of attendance burden. The governor is recommending funding in the amount of $38 million to address the University of Minnesota's goals to attract, educate, and graduate students, and ultimately to reduce financial barriers to student achievement. This particular proposal seeks to achieve that goal by targeting aid to those students who most need support to offset tuition or fees or other costs of attendance items, as well as creating a new scholarship program specifically supporting students from greater Minnesota system campuses of the University of Minnesota system. Secondly, related to the increasing access to the university through enhanced student services, the governor is recommending funding in the amount of $5 million for the University of Minnesota to address the growing need for increased student supportive services. The university's system-wide strategic plan outlines specific goals to increase student outcomes, including retention and graduation, mental health, and campus climate, all while addressing equity gaps that exist for low-income and Black, Indigenous, and students of color. Specifically for Minnesota State, the governor is also recommending funding for two key components of the total budget request of the Minnesota State system. First, related to campus responsiveness and stabilization, the governor is recommending support in the amount of $24 million for Minnesota State campuses, providing the operating funds they need to continue offering high quality, affordable higher education programs throughout the state. And the funding in this proposal would provide additional operating funds to support Minnesota State's core education programs in light of the COVID-19 disruptions they've experienced. And then secondly, related to the equity and affordability measure that directly supports student critical needs, the governor is recommending funding in the amount of $15 million for Minnesota State to address critical needs that stand in the way of college and university students pursuing and completing their educational programs. This proposal will protect access and affordability for students, will provide all Minnesota State students with access to a variety of mental health support options, will address workforce gaps through innovative career, technical, and professional programming serving business and industry, and will provide all Minnesota State students with access to a statewide basic needs resource hub to connect to resources on campus and in the local community and statewide. And so, Madam Chair and members, with that concludes my formal presentation through the slides, and want to thank you again for the opportunity to address the committee. And of course, we'll stand for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Representative Mason. Representative Mason, you're on mute.
There was one slide, maybe about 8 slides back, but I didn't write down the name of the program. But what I do remember is, and just want to make sure I'm interpreting right, it sounded like if the student got $1 or more, it was counted toward the fact that they had received a full grant or something. So that's what I would like interpreted, to see if I understood what you were saying, or maybe, because I'm thinking $1 or more shouldn't disqualify somebody.
Commissioner Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Mason. Yeah, so the proposal here for the eligibility requirement changes for the Minnesota State Grant Program are essentially that, currently state grant eligibility is based on credits of enrollment and not necessarily credits of financial aid actually received. And so under current law, students may be eligible to receive a state grant for up to 8 semesters of enrollment.
Okay.
But this will now transition the eligibility for students that actually are taking credits and receiving state grant for those credits. So it transitions from a terms of enrollment to a terms of receipt of actual grant award.
Okay, so the $1 in there means it's you're appealing something previously. Is that what I'm understanding then?
Commissioner Olson.
Thank you, Chair Bernardi and Representative Mason. Essentially, the $1 establishes the absolute minimum number or amount of financial aid grant receipt that a student will receive. So rather than having it solely tied to credits or terms of enrollment, it's actually for a student that receives at least $1 of state grant award. That's when they would qualify.
Okay, thank you.
Oh man, Commissioner Olson is kind of clear as mud. I'm gonna just reinforce what Representative Mason is asking. I don't know if she totally got it. Can you, so students, Commissioner Olson, can you explain it in any different way? Students are now gonna have 10 semesters in which to be able to draw from the grant program. And this $1, if they receive $1 in aid, that counts as a semester. Am I understanding that correctly? Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, Chair Bernardi, thank you. Maybe just a general example may help. So, we recognize at the office that some students may exhaust all of their state grant eligibility while they were enrolled as a dependent student, having to report their parental income on the FAFSA, and that makes them ineligible essentially to receive state grant in the future if they are a independent student or their financial picture may have changed. And so this gives them now an opportunity particularly for students that may have stopped out and are looking to re-engage with their higher education pathway as an independent student. This gives them the ability to be eligible once again for state grant. And so it transitions from credits they may have taken already to actual receipt of financial aid or state grant award. And it looks like Nikki may be wanting to bail me out or add something more valuable there, if I may ask Nikki to respond to.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Oliver, welcome to the committee. Please proceed and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Chair Bernardi and committee members. For the record, my name is Nikki Oliver. I'm the Director of Grants and Government Relations for the Minnesota Office of Higher Education. And just to make a point of clarification, when the commissioner mentioned the $1, it's actually the minimum state grant award is $50, so no student should receive less than $50 per term. It actually should be the one credit. So you should, which is what he was clarifying, is that it actually is one credit. So if a student receives state grant for a credit, that is now what is you're getting counted for. As the law currently is written, a student could have, let's say we are currently at 120 credit maximum for being eligible for state grant. So a student could have 110 credits, but only receive state grant for 100 of those. And then they still need 30 credits to complete their term. So as the law is currently written, those last 10 credits the student needs, they will not be eligible for state grant, even though they did not receive state grant for the other 120 credits. So we're trying to adjust that so students will continue to receive state grant. So with this new change, students could potentially be eligible for receipt of state grant for an additional 2 terms. So it's basically expanding their term eligibility. I know it's a lot of words, but those 8,000 students, we could see them receiving an average of $3,600 more for 2 more terms, not more, but for 2 more terms, when they would normally be cut off of state grant eligibility. So it's to allow more students to be able to complete their degrees. We know there's a lot of part-time students. We also know that some programs do take longer to complete nowadays. So we want to make sure we're giving students the opportunity to receive necessary financial aid.
So thanks, Ms. Oliver. So let me ask you this question. So they're still eligible for 120 credits. They can just get it over a 10 semester period of time. Would they get more than 120 credits?
So a student could go to school for more than 120 credits, but currently as the law is written, that doesn't mean they were receiving state grant during those 120 credits. So we're opening it up so they're eligible for state grant for 120 credits. So currently, if you're at 120 credits, so hopefully this will help a little bit. I know it's very complicated, but if a student has already received 120 credits, but they have yet to complete their program, they need 10 additional credits to complete, but they currently would not be able to get state grant for those 10 additional credits. Say they only receive state grant for 100 of those credits that they've received, but we only cap it at number of credits they've taken regardless of them receiving state grant. So we're trying to change that so they can receive more financial aid does that help a little bit? I'm sorry, I see you nodding, so just want to make sure.
I think so, but if members have any other questions, because I think this is important for us to get our heads around this, but what it's making sure that people are eligible to receive their 120 credits.
Worth of state grant, yes.
Worth of state grant.
Worth
correct.
of state grant, yes.
Okay, so sounds like common sense, it seems like, but I appreciate your patience with us, and I would just want to let other members, if they have any other questions regarding that, to gain a really good understanding, please let me know. Representative Mason, did you have anything else? Your hand's still up. And you're on mute.
I will put it down, but I think maybe showing the slide might be helpful as well. Maybe we're done with it now, but that might have been easier to look at the verbiage and connect it with the explanation we've got. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I have Representative O'Neill and then Representative Albright. So Representative O'Neill.
Madam Chair, I'll go at the end of my team. I put my hand up before other people had a chance to. So go ahead and go to Albright and Erickson, and then I'll finish up at the end. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Representative Albright.
Mr. Olson, in your testimony, we talked about the college application fee waiver grants and a one-time $10 million appropriation for a pilot program. That would equate to, at your high end, $55 per each, 182,000 applications. When we have probably, I suppose, 55 or 60,000 seniors graduating in a year. So your proposition is that they're going to be applying to 3 higher ed institutions. Would all of those institutions that would have their fee waived be inside the boundaries of Minnesota?
Commissioner Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Albright. Yes, this would be for Minnesota institutions, public, nonprofit, private, and tribal as well.
Representative Albright, do you have follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And what happens to those dollars if they are not consumed by the waiver of the fees? Where do those reside if, say, $3 or $4 million is not utilized? Where does that money go?
Commissioner Olson.
Thank you, Representative Bernardi, or excuse me, Chair Bernardi and Representative Albright. Not sure I'm following. My apologies. Any unused appropriations would be canceled back?
Representative Albright, did you
That's the answer I was looking for, Madam Chair. And just one final question with the Student Parent Center grants. Could you elaborate on what you say when you say the unique needs of expectant and parenting college students? I'd like some understanding in terms of what you're describing when you use those words.
Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Bernardi and Representative Albright. I could give a multitude of examples. We have some research that we're relying on. We know that single mothers in Minnesota, in particular, that graduate with an Associate of Arts degree, they're 48% less likely to live in poverty than if they were a high school graduate. We know that they'll earn more over their lifetime than over a high school diploma. We know that even that grows exponentially for single mothers that earn a bachelor's degree. But we know that they have some unique needs. I mean, 64% of emergency assistance grant recipients from our last grant round were student parents. So they have unique financial needs. They have unique needs related to childcare, related to housing, more likely to experience food insecurity. We know that nearly 70% of two-year college students with dependents, so with children, live at or below 200% of the federal poverty line. This is a unique population of students in Minnesota that have incredibly unique needs that need additional supports provided on campus and connection to additional public benefits, which the proposal helps to address.
Representative Albright, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, Madam Chair. And along that same line, Mr. Olson, with regard to the governor's supplemental budget recommendations to OHE for the University of Minnesota, you're asking or suggesting, proposing $5 million for enhanced student services for their personal well-being and academic success. Pardon my skepticism, but what part of personal well-being and academic success are you speaking to when you're allocating an additional $5 million for that? I find that highly irregular.
Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Bernardi and Representative Albright. Yeah, that was one of the components of the University of Minnesota's budget request that the governor wholeheartedly supported, because it provides, some of the additional assistance I was just talking about to meet the needs of student parents. This is an opportunity to enhance mental health services at the University of Minnesota, provide additional opportunities for tutoring services, more one-on-one touch points with individual students, opportunities for expanded financial literacy, for more one-on-one academic advising. So those are the components within the $5 million recommendation by the governor for the University of Minnesota specifically. And I would say similarly, those necessary supports at Minnesota State as well, which are part of the $15 million recommendation. I know Minnesota State has been to the committee numerous times requesting additional support specifically for mental health and for some of those student services needs that have only been exacerbated by COVID. And so the governor's looking to support, out of all of the requests from the university and from Minnesota State, those in particular, because of how they address the unique needs of students.
Representative Albright, do you have any more follow-ups?
Not at this time, Madam Chair. I think the members of my caucus have questions that are pertinent to the subject as well.
Thank you. Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question is for Ms. Oliver, who I think does very well at explaining to us some of the items in this proposal. So if she could answer this question in regard to the state grant modification, where we move from 8 semesters to 10 semesters, is there any specific stipulation or criteria that a student would have to meet? Because I'm thinking about a change in your major, for example. Is that going to be okay to continue to receive more state grant money if you're changing majors and maybe changing frequently? So just explain, are there any specific criteria or stipulations along with this increase, or is it just automatic?
Ms. Oliver.
Madam Chair, Representative Erickson, there will be no additional stipulations, but the state grant does have other stipulations. They cannot already have received a bachelor's degree. I think they have to be in good, satisfactory academic progress. And we also have Nicole Whelan, who works on our state grant program here also, but we're not adding any additional stipulations, but within the existing state grant program, there are already kind of some guardrails there. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is unrelated to the state grant program, but Ms. Oliver, does OHE collect data on whether or not a graduate with a particular major actually gets employed with that major as their application affirmation? I mean, I'm always curious, do our students graduate from our state college system in the University of Minnesota getting a job, a career in their major? And I don't know if you could provide us with that data. If you do, collect that data. I'm not sure if you do follow up on your graduates, but I'm just always curious about that. But thank you very much for the work you do at OHE. I always appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Oliver, did you have, could you respond, please?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Representative Erickson, I believe DEED collects that data, and we also have the state longitudinal educational data system. If you wanted to kind of track student progress, those are also some tools in which you can look at to see where students end up. I'm not quite sure if the SLEDS tracks by major though, but I do believe DEED has graduate employment kind of outcome information.
Thank you. Do you have any follow-up, Representative?
No, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Oliver.
Thank you. Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, OHE, for coming and doing this presentation. I really appreciate it. It's always good to know what's on the governor's mind. A couple of things I wanted to point out that I am very supportive of, and I believe my team probably would be as well. Adding more money, the $2 million to the dual training, the pipeline project. I'm so glad that you're doing that. We need more people in the workforce as fast as we can. And this is a really great model. It's the Bueller model from Germany, worked with Senator Bonoff when she was in the Senate to move this forward. So I'm really glad to hear that it's successful and we're going to put more money in to meet those needs. The other piece that I found very exciting, and I've said this repeatedly when they've come in, is supporting the tribal colleges. And I am always thrilled when we have members of the tribal colleges that come and do presentations. It's, you said that you were offering a $1.7 million addition to what's currently in the base. I'm wondering if that is some ongoing funds or is this a one-time appropriation? And also I'd like to know if anybody remembers what the tribal colleges total ask was of what they needed to move forward, or if they made a concrete ask. That's my first question, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair and Representative O'Neill. Thanks for highlighting those two programs. Really appreciate your support and excitement there. Regarding your question for the Tribal College Supplemental Support, I do not recall if there was a specific ask made by the presidents, either individually or collectively. But this proposal does bring that funding in line with the per FTE of other publics, particularly the two-year sector in Minnesota State. Related to and my apologies, I didn't remember the first part of your question there, Representative O'Neill.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had asked if that was going to be in the tails, so an ongoing appropriation.
Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, Representative O'Neill. Yeah, this is at this time a one-time request, being a supplemental budget request, but the intent would be for this to be ongoing and sustainable funding.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Olson. I appreciate that. I hope that going forward, I'm just going to put it on the record that we can support our tribal colleges in a greater way. Again, being someone that grew up there, just inches almost from several reservations, knowing the struggles that my classmates and others and community members that I grew up with are going through and have gone through. There's nothing better we could spend money on is to support them. So I really appreciate that. One of the things I actually have a concern about moving forward is the $10 million appropriation that's a pilot to compensate for the application fees. And my question is, it seems like a small amount of money with a high administrative cost. Do you happen to know what the cost out of that 10 million to create this program and the administrative cost moving forward? And Representative Albright kind of alluded to it when he kind of talked about the numbers. They just don't quite work. And so I'm wondering, how heavy administrative cost is this for the application fees?
Commissioner Olson.
Thank you, Chair Bernardi, Representative O'Neill. Yeah, the large majority, if not almost all the funds, will be available for colleges to request reimbursement to fill in the loss of revenue from those application fees. We estimated on the low end, colleges receiving around $37,000 within the Minnesota state system individually, to upwards of $100,000. We do know the University of Minnesota system is close to $2 million in application fees. We haven't been able to specifically extrapolate those numbers for private nonprofits, which are included in the proposal as well. But given the volume at the University of Minnesota, that could be comparable. And so the majority of the $10 million actually will be available for campuses and systems to request reimbursement for the revenue loss there.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for that answer. I wasn't sure how that would be administrated, but I see now that it's kind of the other way. Instead of dealing with the student, you're actually just dealing with the institution, which makes it a little bit cleaner and easier. Okay, next thing, the University of Minnesota had an ask of $250 million one time, but also 75 million in the tails. They also had a large ask for capital investment, and in total it was about $1 billion. And I see that the governor has, I wouldn't say compromised, but he's offered them something. $43 million is the governor's kind of counter to that. My question is, since the University of Minnesota did ask for 75 million in the tails going forward, is the governor's budget here, is that also money in the tails, or is this a one-time appropriation of 43 million?
Commissioner Olson.
Thank you, Chair Bernardi, Representative O'Neill. Yeah, again, similar answer to your previous question. We are in a supplemental budget situation, and so this is at this time a one-time request, but the intent, would be for ongoing base appropriations. And I believe, of that 75 million, I had actually from their request seen 65 million, but the governor total is requesting 43 million of that. And I think he keyed in really on those student support services that Representative Albright asked about, but also was really excited about the additional scholarship opportunities to enhance their Promise program, as well as provide the scholarship to the greater Minnesota campuses of the University of Minnesota system, which we know have been experiencing some unique challenges specifically related to enrollment.
Representative O'Neill, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm almost done, I promise. Thank you, Madam Chair. So my concern with the University of Minnesota is, again, which I've stated on the record a few times now, the contractual change for the president in the middle of her contract that raised her to $1.2 million in total by the time she's at the end of her contract. In so doing, they also cut 3 men's sports teams. Now they would say, the regents would say that that is because of trying to balance, with the women's sports. But what they didn't say is that they had cut 40 positions for the women's sports, and then they felt the need to cut the 3 men's sports teams. In any case, the 3 men's sports teams only saved not even $2 million out of a $125 million budget that the athletics teams have. So that would be one of my concerns. And they also raised tuition 1.5% in the middle of a pandemic, which is problematic. There are also issues with refunding students back some of the money that they had spent on room and board when they were told to leave. And I know that the regents have remedied that since then. But there are several issues at the University of Minnesota, and I'm hesitant to support an increase to them at this time, just because they've demonstrated maybe they don't need this money, since they've already given a large raise to their president, and they will probably be looking at raises for the other administration coming up. They've already looked at one for the AD. So that would be my concern there. With the Min State money, they had asked for 60 million, which was the other half of what they had come to the legislature for in the past. And I see the governor is doing a $39 million support there. What I see is out of balance is that the University of Minnesota system with 43 million versus the Min State system with 39 million. It would seem like that's fair, but what we don't talk about often is that there are about 60,000 students, give or take, at the University of Minnesota system, but there are over 300,000 students in the Min State system. So, they're not apples to apples. I know they do different things, they have different missions, but it's not an apples to apples. And it confuses me a little why the governor's budget has yet more money for the U of M than they do Min State. The last thing I would say is that a news article just hit the waves yesterday, I believe it was. Yes, late last night, from the Star Tribune. And it was a very exposing article about the president of one of the Min State colleges. And it was disturbing, to say the least. I had asked Chancellor Malhotra earlier in committee about the harassment and hostile work environment And that article really spelled out what's actually happening in one of the president's offices of Minn State. And so myself and my colleagues that are on the call right now, Republican colleagues, and our leadership here at the House have asked for his resignation, because I don't think that we should tolerate harassment and a hostile work environment where you are belittling people that are disabled, you are making fun of LGBTQ people, that you are harassing women and saying they're terrible mothers and terrible wives, and a whole long list of things that were in that article. And so I just wanted to put that on the record, that I hope that that particular president is listening and that he will do the right thing and he will step down and give some solace to a lot of people that he's hurt. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member, are there any other questions? Okay, I don't see any more. Would you like to say some closing comments, Commissioner Olson, or anything else you'd like to add?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nothing additional to add at this time, other than to reiterate my appreciation for the opportunity to come to the committee today and share the governor's budget recommendations, and appreciate all of the questions, and hopefully when we return we'll be able to clarify some things that may be still a little confusing. I do know when we get into state grant policy, sometimes those changes can be confusing, but thanks for bearing with us. And we'll be sure and share any information. If you have follow-up questions following the hearing, please let us know. We'd be happy to clarify anything. But Madam Chair and members, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson and Ms. Oliver. And then in the wings, the backup team, just in case we needed a phone call, is today is Megan Fitzgibbon, Wendy Robinson, and Nicole Whalen. And I want to thank them for their service and being here today as well. So thank you for your testimony. And with that, members, our next meeting is Tuesday, March 1st. The meeting is adjourned.